Greetings and welcome to the Caregiver Circle. This is your fellow caregiver, Kelly. And today I want to talk about something many families avoid discussing until they're in the middle of a crisis, and that's having a power of attorney in place. And I will tell you, I just made it. We were almost in the middle of a crisis, and so I'm so grateful that I learned about this and that we were able to put one in place. As caregivers and adult children, we often focus on the doctor appointments, medications, and helping our parents with the day-to-day tasks that are needed. But there may come a time when important decisions need to be made. And without having the proper paperwork and authorization, even the people who love our parents the most may not be able to help. And let me just say that even those that are closest, like the children, the next of kin, just because you are the next of kin doesn't necessarily mean that you would be able to make certain decisions, especially in the financial arena. So, in order to get this chat started, let's just talk about what a power of attorney is. And simply put, it's a legal document that allows someone you trust to act on your behalf if you're unable to handle certain matters yourself. And that's like if you get sick. Sometimes they're also used, let's say you're out of the country and you're unable to conduct certain business. If you have the appropriate power of attorney, that person that you designate can handle those things for you. So it usually follows like two different distinct categories. One is the financial power of attorney, and that allows you to handle banking matters. It allows you to pay bills, manage property that your parents or loved ones have, and even handling insurance. The other one is a health care power of attorney, sometimes also known as a health proxy. And what this particular power of attorney does is it speaks specifically to medical decisions. So if there is a situation about whether to put your loved one on life support, who gets to make that decision? You cannot just arbitrarily, because you were just so close to this person, or maybe you're the only next of kin. You have to have a healthcare power of attorney on file in order to make that decision in most states. Like I said, and please know that it is best to seek legal advice because in different states and jurisdictions, different things may apply. So this is generally speaking. This healthcare power of attorney also allows doctors to communicate with you and to let you know what's going on. Now, I will say, you don't always have to have a power of attorney for doctors to give information. I know in my situation, my parents had already put my name on the records and my brother, as being individuals that they could speak with to share healthcare information about. So we didn't necessarily for that need that power of attorney, but we did need it for other things. Also, healthcare choices. When a parent cannot speak for themselves, someone has to make that choice. And so when you have that document, then you are able, and you are the named individual, you are able to make those decisions. A lot of times I think that sometimes we or our parents think that they lose their rights when they sign a power of attorney. And you're simply just choosing someone that you trust to help if and when needed. It is not that they are losing their rights altogether. So one of the things, and I was almost just as guilty of, is why families wait too long to get this. A lot of times they don't even realize that this exists or that it's an option. But also a lot of times parents don't think that they need it yet, or they think they'll never need it. They don't want to think about aging. And I think many times they fear losing their independence because it may feel as if they are signing away all of their rights and their decision making. They're giving it to their children. And also as an adult child, sometimes you feel uncomfortable bringing up these situations. You don't want your parents to think, that you're after power, to control their lives. And really, I think one of the biggest reasons is this, that we always assume that there'll be plenty of time. We never foresee these things happening, but the problem is that none of us knows when a crisis will happen. A hospitalization, an accident, a stroke, or cognitive decline can occur unexpectedly. And I know for us, that is exactly what happened. And it happens more often than we like to really accept or believe. So here is the thing. So when, thinking about obtaining a power of attorney, let's talk about what happens without one. So I mentioned a few things, but banks can refuse to discuss accounts. So let's say your parent is unable to do any of the banking at all, transfer money or take money out. You can't just go to the bank and say, hey, I am this person's adult child, and they will give you authorization. Banks definitely are under legal obligations. Without a financial power of attorney, they can do nothing for you. Now, I will say this. For me, because I had been handling my parents' account for the last several years, there were things I was still able to do when my mother could no longer do it because I had already been paying the bills. So I had access to the account and I was able to pay bills, make transfers, and do those type of things. But imagine if you don't have that access and you have not been doing that, can you imagine if their power is shut off? If some of the other utilities are shut off, and even insurance payments. A lot of times they're still making insurance payments, and insurance companies are quick to cancel you without payment. So you want to make sure that, one, all of your parents or your loved ones' financial obligations, how they pay, where to locate this information. Those things are really important. And also, a lot of times without having an actual power of attorney that actually outlines what your loved one wants, it helps to avoid family disagreements. You can have one child who remembers their parents saying one thing and another child remembering them saying something different. And so without that, a lot of times, dissension and disagreements occur. And one of the things I tell you do not want to do is you don't want to unnecessarily have the courts involved in your situation. Bringing these things to the court, whether it's probate, whether it's guardianship, these things take time. They're not easy. And it's just sometimes can be such a hassle and a headache. And so it does not hurt to put these things in place. One of the things, again, is to remember when emotions are already high because someone is sick. It's already a stressful time. The last thing a family needs is additional legal and financial obligations in the way. And what I want to do is I want to share my experience with this. And so, as you guys know, after my dad passed away, I continued to, pay my mom's, it was their household bills. But I also realized, especially as she was getting, having more health challenges, we needed a power of attorney. And I remember that day. Was it that day or was it before? I'm trying to remember the time frame. But I know she had started having multiple hospitalizations. And I remember, I think one time the hospital asking me, did I have power of attorney? And I said, well, I have I'm down as, and they could see that I'm the contact person. And they said, yeah, but that is different from being able to make financial decisions. So it was at that point I said, okay, we need to have a health power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. And at that time, my mom, she was doing pretty good cognitively. There would be things that she would forget at times, but she never forgot who we were. She always knew who we were, and we could still have discussions with her. And so we were able to get the power of attorney forms. This was for the state of Ohio because that's where they lived. So I went directly to the state's website so that I can get the correct papers. And that's something to keep in mind. Based on where you live, it may look a little different. Maybe the wording is different, but you want to make sure that it is where the person that you're caring for lives. Those are the forms you want. And so we were able to get those forms signed, and we had to have a conversation with her to explain that she wasn't giving up anything. And basically for me, because I was already handling her finances, I basically said, this is just making it legal. I had to explain, you know, how I pay your bills every month and I make phone calls on your behalf. This is so that I'm able to do that legally. And so this is why we need those, these papers signed. And so she understood that, she agreed, and she was able to sign those papers. And so we had the power of attorney financially as well as for health done. I do know that for some people, it may not go as smoothly. The one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to shove papers in their face, say, hey, you need to sign these papers. You have to really think about your approach and be careful with your approach. And so instead of saying that, you might want to say, Mom, Dad, if something happened unexpectedly, what would you want us to do? Or have you thought about who you want to help with medical or financial decisions if you couldn't do it yourself? The main thing is you want to emphasize respect. You want to emphasize and let them know that you are listening to what it is that they're saying, and you are preserving their dignity as well as including them in the decision, because this is about their life. And I will tell you, that is one of the things I know many years ago, probably over 20 years ago, when I was a younger adult, my parents would try to tell me what to do if something happened to them. And let me tell you, I wanted no part of that conversation. It just seemed like doom and gloom. I'm like, Mom, I really don't want to hear it. Let's not talk about that. She was like, no, Kelly, it's important that you know. And do you know, I really didn't. There are some things she said that I remember, but one of the last things I remember her saying, here, we put all of the information in this envelope, and this envelope is going to be kept in this china cabinet right here. I remember that so well. But, I never looked at that china cabinet. And when the time finally came, over 20, probably 30 years later, that envelope was no longer there. I can't tell you how much I scrounged and I dug up looking for this envelope that was no longer there anymore. And I have regrets. I really wished I would have listened. I wish that I would have asked these questions at a later stage in my life, and that I was not so immature about the conversation, because now I understand the importance of it perfectly. One of the things that I will say is that I at least knew the things that she wanted in terms of funerals or the whole funeral planning, and I'm going to have another chat about that specifically. So we did have those types of conversations, but I just assumed that that envelope was still there. So, but it wasn't. So that's one of the lessons that I definitely learned. I really don't know what I would have done or what my brother and I would have done if we did not have power of attorney, because it came up as the months passed. It came up quite frequently. In fact, in the month of March, the same month that my dad had passed away, she was now in the hospital, and the car registration was expiring. It expired, I want to say, March 8th, or maybe it was with her birthday. But anyway, it had expired that same month. And I remember even she kept telling me, listen, my license is about to expire. I've got to renew my license. Well, there was nothing we could do about her renewing her license. One, at this point, I knew she did not need to be driving on the road. Two, she was in skilled nursing, so that wasn't happening. But what I could do was I went to renew the registration because at this point, every time I flew into Cleveland, I was driving their vehicle. So I needed to make sure the registration was kept up to date. And what was the first thing they asked me when I went to motor vehicle? They said, do you have power of attorney to register this vehicle? And thankfully, I had power of attorney and I was able. Now, if I would have been thinking, I would have did a registration for 2 years because if you listen to another one of my chats, you will see that if I would have had it, I could have avoided a few things. But at that point, everything was up in the air. My dad had just died. I didn't know what was happening. And, it costs more to register for 2 years than it did for one. So I just registered it for the 1 year. There's so many other things. I was able to handle banking. One of the other things that I learned that I was completely shocked about, because I had been paying my mom's life insurance premiums. And I guess after dealing with what was going on after what happened with my dad, when I went in to make a payment, I just started looking around the account. And I noticed that my dad was the beneficiary on my mom's policy, but there were no alternate beneficiaries. And I was completely shocked. I think it was probably something that just fell through the cracks because we've always, been down as my mom's beneficiaries. So at that point, because I had power of attorney, I was able, and I had access to the account, I was able to get the forms. I was able to put my brother and myself down as her beneficiaries, and then my children as alternate beneficiaries if something happened to my brother or myself. And thank God, at that time, I had no idea that my mother would be gone within 5 months. No idea whatsoever. And if we had not done that, we would have had to go through probate to get that insurance money because our names were not on there. So, there might have been some other things that we could have done directly with the insurance company, but I'm not sure. But I do know for more than likely it would have been through probate, which I have shared with you. And for those of you who know, it's not always the easiest thing based on how much assets your loved one has. So I hope, my experience in sharing some of these things helped you to realize just how important it is to have power of attorney. It's important to know, one, whether or not your parents have it. If not, to do something about that, to correct that. And also, it's important to know where they have stored their documents. Unlike my china cabinet story that is no longer there. Also, make sure you discuss their healthcare wishes with them so you know what it is they want and don't want. And every so often review those documents just to make sure they're up to date. Just like I said, finding out that my dad was the only beneficiary on my mom's policy, if I would not have known that, that could have caused a lot of problems. And I also would, advise you to consult an attorney in the state that they live in if you need guidance and to confirm any matters, because again, every jurisdiction can be different a little bit. But this is just general information that I hope helps you. And again, I know these conversations can feel uncomfortable because they definitely were uncomfortable for me. None of us wants to imagine our parents becoming ill or actually needing help. But having these discussions before a crisis, it is one of the greatest gifts we can give the people we love. It's not about taking away anyone's independence. It's about making sure their wishes can be honored when they need us most, and that we have the tools to carry out their wishes. And so I'm going to leave you with this one question, and that is this. If your parent became unable to make decisions tomorrow, would you know what they wanted? And would you have the legal authority to assist? Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time to join this chat. Please feel free to list any comments, any questions, anything that you need clarity on in the comments below, and I will respond. Until next time, be blessed.